All right, ready to dive into a Technicolor nightmare.
Well, I'm game.
We're taking on Leave Her to Heaven.
That 1945 film noir, right?
The one and only. But here's the thing. It's drenched in Technicolor.
A little unusual for a film noir, wouldn't you say?
Exactly. And we're here to unpack how it uses that color to tell a story.
Because it's not just a pretty picture, right? It's practically a whole language.
You got it. And luckily, you've provided us with some seriously sharp articles and analyses to help us crack the code.
I try to come prepared.
And that's what makes this deep dive so fascinating. This film, a Technicolor dream on the surface, shouldn't work as a noir.
And yet, it totally does. It subverts those expectations, draws you in with this lush beauty, but there's this darkness underneath, you know?
Yeah, a beautifully venomous butterfly. That's a perfect way to put it. And you're right, using Technicolor for film noir back in 1945. That was pretty radical.
Oh, absolutely. In 45, color was still a novelty, mostly used for spectacle. Big, splashy musicals, that sort of thing.
But Leave Her to Heaven flips the script. Uses color to dial up the psychological drama, signal those shifts in power. It even foreshadows Ellen's descent into madness.
That's a brilliant subversion, really. And you were particularly interested in how the filmmakers use color as a language, right?
You read my mind.
Yeah.
But before we go full art theory, how about a quick plot refresher for our listeners who might not be familiar with Leave Her to Heaven?
Sure. In a nutshell, the film revolves around Ellen, played by the always captivating Gene Tierney.
And she falls head over heels for Richard.
A successful novelist who, for Ellen, represents everything her deceased father embodied.
Red flag number one.
You could say that. But love makes you do crazy things, doesn't it?
Especially Ellen's version of love, which tends to, well, crush anything in its path.
To say the least. As soon as she and Richard tie the knot, her jealousy goes into overdrive. And let me tell you, she'll stop at nothing to eliminate anyone she sees as competition.
And that's where Doodlebaum's analysis of the film's three-act structure comes in, right? He talks about these key moments where misinterpretation fuels the narrative.
Exactly. Like how Ellen becomes fixated on Richard's novels, absolutely convinced they're filled with all these hidden messages.
About his true feelings for her stepsister, Ruth.
Hit the nail on the head.
But you know what's interesting? It's not just the text that Ellen misreads. It's like she misinterprets those visual cues, too, the colors themselves.
Because those colors, as Doodlebaum points out, aren't accidental. They're not just decorative. It's a carefully designed system.
Like a secret message embedded within the film itself.
Precisely. And for the audience, it's a visual shorthand.
So true. You see Ellen draped in those vibrant colors, reds, greens, blues, the colors of light. And it's instantly striking, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely, especially when you contrast her with the other characters who are often in more muted tones, earthier palettes.
That deliberate choice makes Ellen's heightened emotions impossible to ignore.
It's as if she's experiencing the world through this prism of raw, almost childlike emotion.
Which makes the fact that those colors also mirror the Technicolor process itself even more brilliant.
Now, that's a fascinating connection.
Right. Technicolor back then used those 3 strips of film, one for each primary color, that were then combined to create the final image.
And the filmmakers dressed Ellen in those same constantly shifting primary colors.
Mirroring that process.
It's subtle, but incredibly effective. It's almost like they're saying, hey, audience, pay attention. Even the colors are telling a story here.
It's like this meta-narrative woven into the film itself.
Exactly. It adds this whole other layer of meaning to Ellen's character, this idea that she sees herself as the director of her own life.
Manipulating reality to fit her desires.
Manipulating color, even, to fit her narrative. And nowhere is that more striking than in the Bar Harbor sequence, where paradise goes dark.
And the colors go wild. Seriously, the way the film uses color to turn up the tension between Ellen and Ruth in Bar Harbor. It's masterful.
It's like their inner turmoil is bleeding right into the scenery.
Totally. It creates this atmosphere you can practically taste.
Remember that scene in the nursery?
Oh, how could I forget?
Ellen's in her signature green.
And Ruth's in red, a classic power clash.
It's more than just a clash, though. It's a visual echo of their conflict. Red and green are complementary colors.
Hold on, complementary colors. Remind me what that means again?
Sure, they're opposites on the color wheel. Red and green, blue and orange, you get the idea. When you put them side by side, they create this visual vibration, a heightened contrast.
They practically pop off the screen.
Exactly. It's like when you hear 2 clashing musical notes. Creates that sense of unease.
Dissonance.
Precisely. So in that nursery scene, it's not just that Ellen and Ruth are at odds.
Yeah.
The colors themselves are amplifying that conflict, making it impossible to ignore.
Which is where Technicolor comes in. Imagine that scene in black and white. It wouldn't have the same punch, would it?
Not even close.
The black and white might tell you there's tension, but the color makes you feel it.
You're right, it's visceral. Now, here's where things get even more interesting. Remember how we talked about Ellen's wardrobe mirroring that 3-strip Technicolor process? That constant shifting between primary colors?
Right, like she's a walking, talking Technicolor dream.
Exactly. But in Bar Harbor, as her jealousy intensifies, her color palette changes. She starts wearing that peach-colored outfit.
You know, I never really registered that before, but now that you mention it...
It's a subtle shift, but it's crucial.
It's like the costume designers giving us a little wink, saying, pay attention, something's off.
It's like that carefully constructed facade of hers is starting to crack, reflecting the chaos brewing inside.
And it's not just Ellen's colors that start to shift, right? There's that whole thing with Ruth going to Mexico, which, if I'm remembering this correctly, plays into the color scheme as well.
You're on fire today. You're absolutely right. Richard's novel, The Deep Well, the one that sends Ellen into a tailspin.
Oh, yeah. The one she's convinced is a secret message about Richard and Ruth's torrid affair.
The cover design, with its green, white, and red.
Yeah.
It's a direct echo of the Mexican flag.
Wow, I never even made that connection before. Talk about reading into things. Or, well, misreading the signs, in Ellen's case.
And that brings us right back to the theme of misinterpretation, doesn't it?
It always comes back to that with Ellen.
She thinks she's so good at deciphering hidden meanings, but she misses the mark entirely. She misreads the novel, Ruth's intentions.
She even misreads the colors themselves.
She's surrounded by these visual clues, these symbols of her own anxieties, but she's completely blind to them.
It's tragic, really. And that's where Gene Tierney's performance is so incredible.
Oh, she's brilliant.
Because it's not just the costumes or the sets, right? It's the way she embodies Ellen's inner world, those emotions bubbling beneath the surface.
This is a master of subtlety.
Those eyes, you can practically see the wheels turning. It really is something else. To convey so much with just a look, a gesture.
It's a testament to her talent, for sure.
Yeah.
She makes you feel those conflicting emotions, the terror and the sympathy all mixed up together.
Speaking of terror, don't you think there's something unsettling about how the film uses color?
How do you mean?
Well, we usually associate these bright, vibrant colors with happiness, with light.
Right.
But in Leave Her to Heaven, they're often used to highlight the most disturbing parts of Ellen's character.
It's true. It's almost like the filmmakers are playing a trick on us.
Exactly. Like they're using Technicolor's beauty to lure us in.
They seduce us with this lush, romantic world.
And then, bam! They pull back the curtain to reveal the darkness underneath.
Precisely.
So we've got jealousy, obsession, a touch of Shakespearean tragedy, all wrapped up in this beautiful, unsettling Technicolor package.
Quite a combination.
But here's a thought experiment for you. What if the studio had gone with their original plan? Filming Leave Her to Heaven in black and white. How do you think that would change things?
That's a good question. I mean, black and white would have played up those classic noir elements, right? The shadows, the moral ambiguity, the whole sense of doom.
Right.
But would it have been as effective? I don't know. I think we might lose something without the color.
That's what I was thinking. It wouldn't hit us in the same way.
Without that clash between the beauty of the visuals and the darkness of the story, I think it wouldn't be as impactful.
It's like the difference between reading about a volcano and actually witnessing it erupt. The black and white might give you the facts, but the color makes you feel the heat.
You're right, it's that visceral experience. In this case, Technicolor isn't just decoration. It's crucial to the storytelling. It takes the drama up a notch, emphasizes the psychological tension. It even adds this layer of irony.
Because we see Ellen surrounded by all this vibrant, almost artificial color.
And it highlights just how detached she is from reality, how trapped she is in her own head.
Wow, that's a really interesting way to look at it. It's like the color itself becomes another character in the film. Silent but ever present.
It really is.
Beautiful and unsettling all at once. It makes you think, doesn't it?
Yeah.
About how much of what we perceive as beautiful is really just a facade.
It's a question that stays with you long after the film ends. And it's a testament to the power of Leave Her to Heaven and the filmmaker's use of color that it continues to spark these conversations.
Absolutely. So to our listeners, if you haven't experienced the chilling beauty of Leave Her to Heaven, I highly recommend adding it to your watch list. But be warned, those Technicolor nightmares, They tend to linger. It's a film that will stay with you, make you question everything you thought you knew about love, obsession, and the seductive power of beauty.
It's unforgettable.
We've only scratched the surface here, and there's so much more to unpack in this visually stunning and thought-provoking film, so I encourage you to dive into those vibrant depths and see what you discover.